Councilmember Shanae Darby. Councilmember Brigida Fields.
Present.
Councilmember Yolanda McCoy.
Here.
Councilmember James Spadola.
Present.
Councilmember Vincent White.
Present.
Councilmember President Trippy Congo.
Here.
Thank you. As a friendly reminder, only members of the committee should be making motions and seconding the motions. Are there any other council members that are not on the committee that are present tonight that I could acknowledge? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, not hearing any.
Councilwoman Bracy.
Councilmember Bracy, okay. Thank you. As a reminder, only the members of the committee should be making motions and seconding the motions. Comments are made from the members of the committee first, and then any other council members that are online will speak first, and then at that time, we would have members of the public come and make any comments towards any of the legislation that we are presenting. The first order on the agenda here is we have a resolution authorizing the mayor to file a third substantial amendment to the city fiscal year 2024, federal fiscal year 2023 annual action plan with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this legislation, do we have someone from the Housing Department to speak on it?
Yes, Madam Chair.
You can proceed. Department Chair, please give your name.
Thank you. My name is Bob Weir. I'm the Director of the Real Estate and Housing Department. There's two resolutions that we are working through. These are basically a budget adjustment. What we're trying to do from Real Estate and Housing is we're trying to be as nimble as possible to make sure that the federal funds that are available to our community are actually being used as quickly as possible. The first substantial amendment, it's to the city's FY24 and the federal FY23, but it has revisions to the city's 25 and the federal 24 FY year. It deletes $15,000 of CDBG funds that had been awarded to the Delaware Center for Horticulture for their Branches to Chances reentry program. That is because DCH has declined the grant, and it takes that $15,000 and applies it to the YWCA Home Life Management Center, and they plan to use that for their homeless shelter for victims of domestic violence.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members of City Council in reference to this? Councilman White?
Madam Chair, I have a question. Mr. Weir, it was declined.
Yes.
How many persons does the Y think they'll be able to serve?
I'm sorry, I can't tell you that without having a little research done, but I would suggest that that is probably in the 10 to 20 individual.
Was the fund set to, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, follow up.
You may follow up, yes.
Were the funds set to expire if we didn't transfer?
Not to expire, but as far as what we're looking at right now is we have a timeliness issue. So as far as the remaining grant amounts, that could be for multiple years, is considered as far as us meeting the 1.5 grant reserve. We are currently at 2.2, I believe, and basically some of these are because the organizations weren't prepared for the grant or the project itself is not prepared for the grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No more further questions.
Any other members of council from the committee that have questions? Anyone online? Councilmember Bracy, do you have any questions or comments, or President Congo?
No question.
Okay, anyone from the public wishing to speak on this agenda item? Okay, not hearing any, since this is a resolution, it does not have to be voted out of committee, but will be presented as we go forth. We have a second resolution authorizing the mayor to file a third substantial amendment to the city fiscal year 2025, federal fiscal year 2024 annual action plan with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Weir, will you be speaking to this as well?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. As far as, once again, this is the federal 24, I'm sorry, the city 24 and the federal 23 plan year. This affects the Cities 24 and the Federal 23 plan. This resolution allows the mayor to sign a substantial amendment that deletes the CDBG street improvement project and delivery costs funded for the streets near Villa Maria project until a later date when the project is closer to implementation. Basically, this is streets, sidewalks, curbs, lighting around the Villa Maria development that is going to take place on Market Street, and you don't do that till the end of the project. The project's been delayed a little bit, so we're looking to take that money and move it into a line that actually can serve the citizens. We're also taking the CDBG code repair program that has not been utilized and the program delivery costs for that. And we're taking that sum total of $450,000 and we're reallocating those funds to our partnership with the Newcastle County Lead Hazard Reduction and Healthy Homes Program. We've seen that program really pick up. Of course, during the pandemic, everything slowed down, but we're seeing that program pick up. They're doing a nice job as far as in partnership with the city's real estate and housing department, and we know that that money is going to move out into the community and serve individuals.
Okay, that sounds good, but my question is this. So when Villa Maria is closer to having to get that done, will monies be reallocated for that project?
They would be automatically submitted into next year's budget.
Okay. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Any members from the council members online?
Yes,
Councilmember McCoy, you may proceed.
thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Weir, my question is, when it comes to the 450,000, I guess, the lead program is actually, one that we can do, great things with, but why that program? How many other programs that we actually had, and why that one was considered?
If I'm hearing the question correctly, the sound's a little bit rough. Is that why was the Newcastle County partnership chosen to be refunded?
Yes.
The need is tremendous. The original grant that we wrote, the county had the staff, and we had the zip codes that had the oldest housing in it that has the most lead paint in it. This program also is healthy homes, so that there's oftentimes that you'll find one that's tested that has elevated lead blood levels, and when you go to their home, there is also additional work that needs to be done. The county's program right now is capped at $15,000. These funds would go to the city's residents that would have repairs that are needed above and beyond that $15,000.
Okay, thank you. May I follow, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, when you stated refunded, I think I may have not heard that initially. So there was funds in this program that we actually either stopped or withdrew, and now we actually are putting funds back into the program. Is that what you're stating?
No, council member, we originally funded that partnership. The second year we refunded it again, and this is acknowledging that the need still is outstripping the resources, and we want to put additional funding into that program. So refund it might not be the technical term for it, but we're continuing to fund that effort.
Yes, that would be the better term for it. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the committee who have questions? Any members that are not in the committee that have a question? I do want to recognize that Councilmember Shanae Darby has joined us, and our CFO, Marshall Bassnight, did you have a question or a comment?
Thanks for asking, Chair. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, again, this piece of legislation being a resolution does not need to be voted out of committee, and we will go on to the next agenda item, and that is ordinance 24-068, an ordinance to amend Chapter 34 of the City Code to establish short-term residential rental regulations. The sponsor is Councilmember Brigida Fields. Councilmember Fields, you may proceed with your legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rear. And
Thank you, Madam Chair. The synopsis is to This ordinance amends Chapter 34 of the City Code by establishing comprehensive regulations for short-term residential rentals, which is defined to mean all or portions thereof residential dwelling unit, which is advertised or held out to the public as a place regularly rented for dwelling, lodging, or sleeping purposes, with a duration of occupancy of 30 consecutive days or less. Hotels, motels, and other land use specifically exempted from the provision of this article and are not considered to be short-term rentals. So, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, because I know everybody is here for this piece of legislation, so thank you all. And I hope that we get this type of feedback when there are other things happening in the city of Wilmington as well. I just hope I can get, when it comes to education for the kids and health, I hope we can get the same outpour. It means a lot. I love it. Okay, so with that being said, this legislation is basically just to regulate short-term rentals. This is not a ban. This is not opening up to everyone. This has regulations. So, for instance, you want people to live on properties, right? That just does not happen. We have over 70,000 people in the city of Wilmington alone. We cannot have people sell their properties because there's one regulation. Now, if they're grandfathered in, that's one thing. People didn't want the grandfather. You can't make anyone sell their houses because you don't want them to be a short-term rental. That's their property. And the city of Wilmington will be held responsible, and we will have to go to battle, and we will have to go to court because people will sue us. That's number one. Number two, I think the major issue was, what is it? The grandfathering and people living on the property. I haven't heard anything other than that, but the whole thing is we will be gaining revenue from this piece of legislation. As of right now, we have over 777 properties. 437 of them are standalone properties. With the 2% tax and the permit fees, we will gather more than 100,000 plus just by collecting that. And that money could go towards real estate and housing for home repair. It could go to taxes and fees for the finance department. So we have to look at the bigger picture. But we are open, Madam Chair.
Okay. I do want to speak to this. So there has been a great outpour from both sides of people who are pro and people that are against. When Airbnbs were introduced, short-term rentals, just like Uber and Lyft, there was no regulations. It was something new. Taxi drivers were complaining about what was happening to their industry. Same thing may have happened along with these. However, most cities and states across the nation, this was new. They had nothing in place for it. Many of them just let it happen with nothing in place in it. Delaware has been one of those places. There are still states that don't have regulations. But as people saw that this was a growing industry, there has to be regulations for all the reasons that are important. One, you register a business, so we know that is a business. Two, they should be paying filing fees to register the business. They should be paying taxes and what other applicable fees. But this isn't about the money. This is about quality of life in our neighborhoods, because that's really what matters. What happens in your backyard. Councilmember Field says there's 770 Airbnbs in the city of Wilmington. Most recently, it has been brought to our attention that there has been incidents that have happened in a particular district with Airbnbs. Just like rentals, we deal with a lot of the issues with slumlords, landlords that don't police their properties, bad tenants that are in these properties, and they can bring a whole neighborhood down when they don't follow the rules and the regulations. At least with a business who is a rental property, it is registered. They have to pay their fees to register. Inspectors go out to make sure that the property is up to code. None of that happens with Airbnbs. They just exist. They open up, they advertise, they do what they need to do. There is no permitting. There is no checking to see if people are even safe in those properties. Even if those properties are they even up to capacity? Do they exceed the amount of occupancy? There's nothing. Right now, they have been running on their own. There are legitimate business owners, one of them is sitting here, who registers their properties as a business, does it. Most of her people don't even stay less than 30 days. But she pays her fees, she pays her fines. Her rules are very extreme, I found. She won't let any visitors in hers. She kicked out the family of a couple that came to stay at an Airbnb when the kids came to have dinner with them. She says they're not allowed there. The family's not allowed there. It wasn't a party. It was just a family having dinner. She said, it's in the rules, not allowed, you got to leave. I mean, people can run their businesses correctly or they can run them incorrectly. We run afoul of more landlords that break our rules, who let people live in squalor. Right now, I got a call today from a friend who's being evicted with a sign on their door with no proper eviction notice. Nothing has been done, no process, no due process. But this is what property owners do. We have other types of businesses in our city, which we call them nuisance properties, nuisance businesses, liquor stores. They run afoul of the rules and regulations. People loiter. We have rules against loitering. We have rules against drug sales and, drinking alcohol in public. The rules are broken. It's a problem property. But we don't ban liquor stores from the city of Wilmington, and trust me, I would like to do that. But we have legitimately running liquor stores in Trolley Square. You have Union. Not a problem. You go in, you get your liquor, you come out. You don't see anybody hanging out. You don't see loitering. You don't see drug sales. You don't have shootings. People aren't dropping. It doesn't happen. It's about the business owner and how they run the business. So what we want to do is, we want to make sure, first of all, who are you? You're in our city. You're running a business. I don't see any way on how the city can actually shut anybody down and tell them you can't have that business there anymore. You got to sell your property, rent, or do something else like any other business. But let's just say they're there. They're running their business. If they're causing problems, as some have done, you call the police, you report them, L&I, the city gets involved. We have shut problem businesses down because of the nuisance points and because of the calls that neighbors have made, and they have been legitimate. You can't just call and complain about something. The police has to come out, or L&I, and find a legitimate problem. Liquor stores have been closed, restaurants have been closed, corner stores have been closed because of nuisance issues. So a business can be shut down if they're not running legitimately. So the question really is, do we allow these type of businesses in residential neighborhoods? I think that ship already sailed. It's not about whether we allow them. They're already there. They're there. They're among us. I know there's a question of the owners, that they live out of town, that they live out of state. I know right now the people that are sitting here that are owners of Airbnbs, they're my constituents. They live in the city of Wilmington. I know where they live. I've been to their homes. So they're legitimately living in their neighborhoods and running this business. So it's really about, how do we regulate them? What kind of rules do we put in place? You can't allow people to just come into your neighborhood and do whatever they want. They are doing it now. So we're trying to find a place where, first, we got to know who you are. You got to register them. You should pay your fees. And if there's a problem or an issue, there has to be a person that you call, that you hold accountable, that the police can call and hold accountable, that we can hold accountable, that we can take their license away, that we can shut that business down. We have to start somewhere. In lieu of having nothing, and if we don't vote this out of committee and it doesn't get voted on council, it's just going to go into the next session and it's going to linger until something happens, somebody comes up with something that everyone finds palatable. When Councilmember Fields introduced just having them registered, people didn't like that. We got a lot of feedback from you. Changes were made. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the legislation since she last presented it, but it specifically talks about L&I coming out, doing inspections, quantity, how many people can be in an Airbnb. We got to grandfather the ones that are here now already existing, but even in the future, not allowing anyone to own more than 3 properties. And I know the Airbnb people don't like that, but it is what it is, short-term rentals. We're coming up with something moving into the future to put parameters in place. And one thing about legislation, it can always be amended. And one of the reasons this legislation was held before was because they felt that it was too draconian. We heard back from the community, so it was held to give it further discussion. Then we came up with something, at least to have something in the books, getting us into the new year so that the city can be held accountable for taking action, and we can hold them accountable. Now, changes were made to what was originally proposed because we got feedback from the community to put a little bit more teeth into it, to make it a little bit more stricter so that you feel that you have a little bit more control about what happens in your neighborhood. And not to say that this is an end-all, because we can maybe have public meetings, have town halls, and have everybody come together and have a positive discourse on the pros and cons and what you need to do to keep the problem properties, to report the problem properties so that they don't plague your neighborhood. And I've heard about the incidents that happen, and we listen, we are listening. But I'm also hearing all the other neighborhoods that don't have those incidents, the people who haven't had issues happen in their neighborhood. And it was unfortunate that it did happen. It shouldn't happen anywhere. But we do have issues that happen with problem properties across the city. So it's how we take action that matters. So with that said, I open the floor up for any questions from the council members on the committee first, then we'll go to anyone that's online, and then we open up to the public. Councilmember Field?
So, where do I start? First of all, I don't know who "we" is, because this was put on the agenda a week or so ago, and nobody was consulted. I wasn't consulted. Other members were not consulted. The community was not consulted. So this is a zoning issue first and foremost. And the key question is, does someone have the inherent right to have a short-term rental on their property or not? Even more specific, does someone have an inherent right to have a non-owner occupied short-term rental on their property? It is a little bit of a gray area. However, the city does not accept that you have an inherent right to do that. And I'm going to read 3 lines from a letter that was sent to an Airbnb based on the city's interpretation. It has come to our attention that the subject property is being used as a transient residential rental facility. Please be advised that the property is located in an R3 zoning district and that such a use is not permitted pursuant to Wilmington City Code Section 48-134C. Accordingly, you are hereby directed to cease using this property in this capacity. Failure to comply with this directive may result in legal action being taken against you. That is sent to, not because of behavior, but existence. So right now, there's a pretty dominant interpretation that no one has an inherent right to have an Airbnb, especially non-owner occupied. If somebody wants to change the code, they can go about doing that, and there are processes for that. But the bottom line is that this legislation blesses the concept of non-owner occupied Airbnbs as long as you pay 2% tax and fill out a form. And the overwhelming majority of City of Wilmington residents are not for that. I got 55 or 60 emails. 5 or 6 were for. All of the people for were Airbnb owners, and everybody else are City of Wilmington residents. So, I don't know who "we" is, but, we just have to look at data and specific facts. And second, it's a complicated topic. That is where I do agree with Council Member Cabrera. It is complicated. This was on the agenda last Thursday, the week before Thanksgiving, the last meeting of the year. This is a very complicated topic. There's no time to reach out to community associations, to have thorough discussions, and to vet this. And I just ask that that the sponsor give strong consideration to holding it.
Thank you, Councilmember Field. Councilmember Spadola?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to really hone in on the timing issue first. So this was introduced the Thursday before Thanksgiving. Essentially, we've had 4 business days, the Friday after, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now we're here. Keep in mind that this meeting is generally held the second Thursday of the month, but instead it's being held the first Monday of the month with the full council meeting if this passes on Thursday. I can't think of another piece of legislation that from first and second reading goes to a full council vote within 2 weeks. I think it's healthy for feedback, for community engagement, for there to be a natural breathing period of at least a month so civic associations can talk about it. There can be nuanced feedback, nuanced discussion, more time to give suggestions to the sponsor, not over a holiday weekend. So there's that. Secondly, in dealing with some of the problem Airbnbs, my biggest issue, it's not the Airbnb owners, it's the platforms. The platforms do not take care of their problem properties. We've seen that I've seen that with the ones I've gotten involved with. They ignored the cease and desist letters. And so anything at this point, until the platforms take care of their problem properties, I do not want to further legitimize their existence with this. I do like the idea of a revenue, and I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there with something much more nuanced that can, takes into account, driveways, yards, all things that should be considered when we're putting up Airbnbs. But until the platforms respond to the city and shut down problem properties, we're adding to the list of problems that this city has that Councilmember Cabrera talked about, whether it's nuisance liquor stores, nuisance slumlords. When we're essentially giving a platform the ability to license a hotel operator, knowing they'll do nothing if there are problems, I don't think that's good policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Spadola. I do agree with you on that the platform does have to take some responsibility. I clearly understand that an Airbnb owner made the platform aware of what they questioned to be a listing that didn't seem to be legit. They allowed it to proceed, and problems did arise from that particular listing. So you make a very valid point. I would like to ask a question of our CFO. Marshall, do we have a policy in place in terms of when legislation goes before council after it goes to committee? And just in full disclosure, that on November 14th, I was away at a conference. We did hold an abbreviated community development and urban planning meeting because of the time constraints and the fact that I needed to be in a certain place at a certain time, but we allowed the meeting to go forward. I was going to change the meeting completely for this date and not even hold that meeting on the 14th. So that is the reason that we're having this meeting. Technically, we do not have meetings in December, so there would be no meeting taking place other than because of the reschedule. So that is what we're doing here. But Marshall, could you, Ms. Masnick, could you answer that question? Do we have a set schedule on how, after something goes to committee, normally it does go to the next council meeting, or sometimes it is scheduled another week in advance? Is there a process, or it just depends on the schedule?
So, Chairwoman, we typically follow our the FOIA guidelines. So for this December 2nd meeting, the agenda was posted on Friday, November the 22nd. If this legislation was to come out of committee today, it will be scheduled for the December the 12th council agenda, because we need to have 7 days advance notice to post the agenda. So this legislation is not on this Thursday's agenda.
3 weeks, not 2. Got it.
Thank you. But we don't have a standard dates, or that we try to, it just basically happens according to schedule. We don't say, that we have to wait 2 weeks before something goes before council, after it comes out of committee or first and second reading. I just want to know, do we have a standard process in place, or just we go with the flow as to the availability and the timing?
We go with the available timing, which is typically dictated by, the FOIA guidelines, meaning as long as we're within that 7-day FOIA for posting.
Yes, FOIA, that's what I thought. Okay. Other council members?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, proceed.
Just a statement. It would appear that I would agree with you. We're into the cowboy ages, at least, of Airbnb operations. I'm sure half the audience is for and half the audience is against, but maybe that's just wishful thinking. But I think the question comes that should we ignore the fact that there are businesses operating as, in this situation, as non-businesses, given the city code? And is there an opportunity to regulate those businesses in a way that one allows for this activity to occur? But I often put myself as my neighbor would. If I was living next to a business that happened to be operating, or living next to a home that's happened to be operating as an Airbnb, would I want more or less regulation? And so I think this is the conversation that this bill, that this proposed ordinance has. And, you know, again, I don't want to be presumptuous, but the operators have a particular interest to continue unregulated, and the community has a particular interest to regulate those businesses. And so I think this legislation becomes a good stepping off point, and I'm waiting to hear from the prospective members of the public regarding their particular issues or questions or statements. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And again, you make a valid point. They're here, they're already running unregulated. So do we regulate or not, or find some middle ground as we proceed? Councilmember Darby?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I'm not in support of this legislation. The lack of community engagement, the lack of council engagement. I didn't get a call from the sponsor not till like late last week about this. I think education, I was going to say something about education that was mentioned earlier. I was about to say that education conversations and legislation doesn't happen at city council. So that was like trying to throw a shot at the community. And that's not what we do here. That's where you go for school board and state. And then you out of point of order this whole time. And then another argument is just because there isn't like a set standard or policy for something, because we're trying to make an argument that we're doing the right thing, but it should be transparent, regardless what you do. And it should be engaging of the community and all council people. So it's not a we, it's a small group of people on city council. This legislation is rushed, and I don't want to pay the price later because I won my election and I'll be here. And the sponsor will not even be here the next election. And I think it's really important that the next city council members, we can propose legislation to really engage the community, to have this conversation about Airbnbs, about L&I in general in regards to inspection, registration. We can do that early next year. Like, I'm willing to put it up if no one else isn't willing to put it up, for us to have that conversation. I don't want to pay the price for a decision being rushed and not being fully engaged by a council person. So I'm not against Airbnbs being in residential areas. So I know that argument has been made in emails to us. We don't want them in our communities. I believe they belong in the communities. I believe in regulation too, but I don't want to have rushed legislation that didn't engage community and all of council to be a part of this. And it's going to impact my district. And I wasn't engaged at all. Until the last minute, right before the holidays. So I'm going to be a no on this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. I do want to point out that this legislation was discussed over the summer months. It was introduced, and members did look at it, and there was a lot of discussion around it after first and second reading, so it never made it to committee because it needed more work. It was very restrictive, but the conversation has been out there, and I don't know, I'm getting this thing about how it's rushed. If it wasn't an election year and we were still going into a regular session, would that even matter? So this legislation was a piece of legislation that was unfinished from this year. And I will just say, maybe the sponsor wants to finish her legislation before she rotates out of office, but this was not rushed. The conversations were had. There are people who will speak that are in this room that have had conversations about this. Conversations were had when we got the complaints about the problems that happen in the 8th District. So conversations have been had. So if conversations haven't been had recently, I apologize as the chair of the committee that didn't happen with every single person, but the conversations have been had. So I do want to point that out. We have any other council members that haven't spoken yet? All right, Councilmember Spadola.
Yeah, I just want to say, just in terms of the conversation that's been ongoing, Councilmember Field himself was a sponsor of that initial legislation. This legislation is a total 180 from what we were talking about over the summer. This isn't a slight amendment. It says substitute, but it may as well be brand new. It's a total 180 from what we were talking about before. So I just, respectfully, I think it's disingenuous to say this conversation has been going on.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm glad it's a 180 because that legislation that was presented was horrific.
May I speak, Madam?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so the first piece of legislation was withdrawn because my council members told me they would not support it, unlike some, I mean, you know, whoever voted for it or don't vote for it, don't like it, who I didn't talk to, whatever. But most of them were like, if someone has to live on their property, I'm not voting for it because I can't take that. So we already had to withdraw it because we had so much feedback from the short-term rental association as well as the other community. And let me say this, all of the communities have been talked to, unlike, you know, I will say this, some communities come out when they hear information, some of them don't. And it's just unfortunate, but when 1/8 of 8 districts come out, and there's 8 districts, and I don't hear from any other districts where I've had any other complaints about it. If anything, they're like, at least this is a start. At least this is something that we could work off of and grow off of. You know, I don't see the point, but we have to, let's not belittle our entire city of Wilmington. This is not about one particular area. This is not NIMN. Not in my neighborhood. This is not that kind of legislation. This is for the entire city of Wilmington. These are for the entrepreneurs. So whether you live in the 8th district, 2nd district, 1st district, 5th district, you live there and these are your businesses. That's it. And so unfortunately, some people answer their phone, some people don't, but we have been talking about this for a very long time. And to go back to the withdrawing, yes, I had to withdraw it. And that piece of legislation is dead. I did this piece of legislation on myself. I did not ask Councilmember Field to co-sponsor because I know he wanted people to live on the property and he did not want to grandfather people in. And he wanted the operators to sell their properties. And it just does not work. We have to be fair to everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome. Councilmember Field?
So I just want to answer several points. So first of all, statistically, there are more Airbnbs in the 8th district than in any other district, probably combined. So it is only natural that there would be more friction from the 8th district than other districts. It is not a reflection that anybody is being favored or given special treatment. It's a reflection of where the problem is happening. Secondly, just the concept of non-owner occupied. First of all, everybody that has an Airbnb is engaged in a speculative business. That's the way business works. So everybody knows what they're doing, and sometimes in an industry, when somebody engages in a speculative business, things change or whatever. Nobody can say, oh, I was doing it and nobody forced me to stop, so therefore I have a special right to keep doing it. Third, the concept of non-owner occupied is the norm for every big city on the East Coast. So the idea that it's the norm. There's a difference between an Airbnb where somebody has a distinct apartment unit and an Airbnb where somebody is purchasing a property exclusively for the purpose of an investment which they have no intention of ever living in. The first category is not a huge problem and something that we could easily find a way to deal with. The second category is the concept of non-owner occupied. And the reality is the vast majority of the Airbnbs in the city of Wilmington are non-owner occupied, and if you look up online, the owner does not live in Wilmington, probably does not even live in Delaware. And that's just a fact. Go to Newcastle County Recorder of Deeds and look it up. And then finally, these are two separate pieces of legislation. It is a 180 from the previous ordinance, and it was put forward without any consultation with the council members where this issue or probably the 3 or 4 council members where this issue is most prevalent. So that's just a fact. It's not good process to try and jam it through and think that it's unreasonable for people to come out. It's not. And so if we do get the public comment, I would like to have a tally, and I will be taking note, because this notion that it's somehow 50-50 for and against is just not supported by the facts. It's absolutely not supported by the facts. Most of the Airbnb owners are not city residents. Some are, but for every one city resident that's an Airbnb owner, there's 15 to 20 people that are against them in residential neighborhoods.
Councilmember Field, I just wanted to ask you a question. Since the Airbnbs aren't registered, how do you know how many Airbnbs are in your district or anywhere else in the city, for all that matters.
Well, it's very simple. So complaints, people point them out, and in about 1 hour, anybody can go online on the Airbnb website and quickly identify where the Airbnbs are and who owns them in 1 hour.
Okay, just wondering where you got your numbers. Okay, right now, do we have any other council members that have any comments? All right, so we're going to start with taking, first of all, before anyone leaves, we want to make sure that everyone signs in before you leave. A little housekeeping note there. We're going to start with, if you did a list, people signed in? Okay, great. We'll start with the first person here. We're going to go back and forth. We got 3 people online, so we want to give everybody an opportunity that's waiting. Whomever would like to, is there an order? Where's the list at? Okay, Dr. Katina?
Get the list.
Dr. Katina, and then I need the list.
Got the list?
Okay, yeah. So this is the first page right here? You can come up to the microphone, you can sit down if you like, whatever is best for you. So and state your name, and if you'd like to state your address for people who do live in the city, please
Absolutely.
do so.
Good evening, Madam Chair and council members. I actually live in the city. I live at the riverfront. I moved here about 2 years ago. I also own an Airbnb right here in the city. I walk to work. I walk home. I walk everywhere. This is my city now. I live here. My name is Dr. Katina Clark. I am a social psychologist, a proud taxpayer, and a resident of this great city of Wilmington. Less than 2 years ago, I moved here to be closer to my work and to the property I rent as a short-term rental. Tonight, I'd like to begin by sharing a story, one that might change how you see short-term rentals. About 3 years ago, I welcomed my very first guest, a woman named Sister Peace. Yes, a woman monk, actually. She was a monk visiting Wilmington to be with her dying brother in hospice. She stayed for 2 months, spending her days by his bedside and her nights in my rental. After his passing, she extended her stay to settle his affairs, and she shared with me how much it meant to her to return each evening to a space that felt like home. Another guest was a military father and his family on leave from their overseas duty station. Because his parents' house couldn't accommodate them, they chose my property, a place with a kitchen where they could prepare safe meals for their young children, both who had severe food allergies. Since I began renting my property as a short-term rental, I've hosted over 250 guests. The majority of my guests have left glowing 5-star reviews, not just for my hosting, but also for the many amenities and attractions that our city offers. My guests are not the disruptive partygoers some might imagine. Instead, they include parents helping their children transition into local universities, international travelers seeking medical care for their loved ones, and professionals like nurses and engineers on temporary work assignment or searching for permanent housing. I've also hosted interns clerking for judges, interning at local law or accounting firms, and medical residents completing rotations at our hospitals. Our guests are people who value the comfort of a home away from home. Short-term rentals bring significant benefit to Wilmington. Our guests enjoy our neighborhoods, attend our festivals, eat in our restaurants, and contribute to the local economy. As a host, I also contribute. I employ a local property manager who lives 1 block away, right up the street from my property, and I live 5 minutes away. I also employ cleaners and tradespeople, all of whom are taxpayers.
20 seconds.
I ensure my property is well maintained, and I'm happy to pay taxes, follow licensing requirements, and meet inspection standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Katina. At this time, I'm going to go to Justin Hunter, who is online. Justin, are you still with us? Make sure you unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. I want to start by saying that I appreciate everyone having this discussion. I think for me, when I think about I also live over at the Devon, so I live in the city of Wilmington. When I think about when we pass new regulations and laws, This amount of outpouring from the community, whether it be pro or against, means that something isn't right yet. We haven't quite gotten it nailed. Things that concern me, I'm definitely not in favor of this as it's currently stand. There have been many cities throughout the world, like New York City, Barcelona, they've all gone to complete bans. Now, I'm not advocating for a complete ban. I'd welcome grandfathering people in and maybe doing an immediate ban while you figure out the complexities of this issue. The woman that spoke just before me, I don't think she's the kind of person that we're trying to prohibit from operating here. Sounds like she's an upstanding citizen and business owner. I think the community is worried with the way the legislation is written as it is. I understand the need to generate revenue and the worry about grandfathering and the people that are already operating, but we can regulate the people who are currently operating without necessarily doing a blanket, anyone can get one of these. I think that the need for revenue also needs to be defined. We're going to get $100,000, but where is that going to go? Several different things were all named, but I'd like to see a little bit more accountability about where that's being directed, perhaps to low-income housing or something that would benefit portions of the community that probably are not going to benefit from this sort of legislation. And then I think the city should also think about the massive investment business communities and hotel chains have made around our riverfront, and doing a blanket, anyone can get one of these Airbnbs, could potentially have negative consequences to what we're trying to do with the riverfront and the many hotels that have opened there. So thank you for your time, and I want everyone to just consider maybe regulating what's currently in place, banning future until we figure out the complexities.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Next is Mark Stump.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
My name is Mark Stump. I live at 1305 West State Street. Personally, I am not an owner of an Airbnb. I am completely surrounded by Airbnbs. My first floor, house next to me, and the one to my right side, the other one. What I have found is all the people that have come in there that are renting from there are very professionals. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have students, we have construction workers, all giving back to the community, actually becoming our friends. They're going to all the different, St. Anthony's, they're going to the Greek festival, they're going and they're visiting restaurants. I noticed that the house 1303, initially moved there 15 years ago, was decrepit. You could walk on the first floor and all you saw was the floor move from roaches and bugs and everything else. When it was finally purchased by the person that turned it into an Airbnb, there are 3 beautiful rentals in there right now. Everything's been revamped, cleaned, there's no bugs, there's no rats, there's nothing else. It's cleaned up outside. Everything is very, very professional. We have become great friends. We've had internationals. When we had the Olympics, we had some Spanish people staying, from Spain staying there. They have become good friends. We correspond back and forth. I want to read an example of a gentleman named Tom Rowe. He and his wife came. They lived right below me. He said, in the past 3 years, I've spent a total of 18 months staying in an Airbnb on 8th Street in Wilmington. I worked on and off at the Salem plant. Staying at an Airbnb had several advantages over a hotel to me. One is no longer stays. I was able to stay for an affordable price. The second is that staying at a home allowed me to become part of a neighborhood. I spent many evenings at local restaurants and shopped at local businesses. As my wife and I spent so much time enjoying the area, they decided to move here. They said if it wasn't for the Airbnb and considering themselves local, they would have never bought in Wilmington. They now live here in a beautiful home. So these Airbnbs not only provide a service for others, but it's allowing our city to grow. It's allowing it to clean itself up. And the people that are coming in here are professionals. They're just not fly-by-nights, let's go party, destroy a neighborhood, and move on. They're here to be part of a neighborhood, and it has worked well. And the person that runs mine, as you know, very professional, has their licenses, permits. We have an L&I there all the time. So I do agree with some regulations. You have to have that in anything you do. But you got to do it realistically and not hamper those that are trying to provide for this city and make it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Regina Lafferty.
Hi, I'm Regina Lafferty, and I live at 1305 West 8th Street as well. Mark is my partner. One thing I wanted to clear up, Airbnb is a platform, and it doesn't own our businesses, and our business is short-term rental. If we were licensed, and Airbnb would require us to supply them with that license, and the number would actually have to be on, because this is in other communities, the license would have to be on our listing. And if your license gets pulled and the city notifies Airbnb that this is no longer a valid license, the ad is pulled. You're out of business. That's how that works. So the platform would pull the ad. I also have, we hosted a majority of the Harris campaign people this year. They could not do hotels. I mean, they came, a lot of them were, when they first started, were driving back and forth from Washington, D.C., and then they looked around and found affordable Airbnbs to stay in, and they shared. I got a thank you note from the young lady that lived downstairs from us. Thank you for housing me these last few months. Your home is wonderful, and I always felt safe, and your joy was always felt warmly. Thank you again, and stay in touch. Best, Maya. She left me that and a little chocolate. But I've had quite a few of my guests have ended up staying in Wilmington or the suburbs, like to live here, to move here. I had somebody move here from California. I'm still friends with her. I had somebody move into the Trolley area, and she's since moved out, but she had to go home and take care of her mother. So I'm friends with her as well. But if we were regulated, then you wouldn't have the issues. And the platforms will back up your regulation. They will. I see, I'm on a lot of the Airbnb. I'm an Airbnb community leader as well as a superhost. And as the community leader for Delaware, I have a page. We see a lot of people in other areas, like I'm on some other Facebook pages, and people will go, oh my God, my listing is shut down.
30 seconds.
Well, they lost their license. So Airbnb shut it down. Now you cannot, they won't be able to find anybody. So that's what I have to say. I support this legislation going forward because we do need regulation.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go online to Susana Casado. Susana, are you still with us?
Yes, good evening. Hello, council members. This is Susana Casado and Joe Casado. We are, I've been a resident of the city of Wilmington for 24 years. I have lived at 902 Harrison for about 12 or 13 of those, and I have purchased homes on North Rodney Street. I have used my Airbnb. We've been super hosts for over 5 years. I've renovated my houses here in the city and kept them up to code. You got to be very careful with what you do with these regulations because I'm a city employee. Obviously I don't make a lot of money, and what we make off our Airbnb actually helps me pays both my mortgages, helps me pay for the renovations on the home I'm currently living on in the city. I pay my taxes. I pay state taxes. I don't know if you guys are aware, but starting December 1st, Airbnb properties are going to have to be registered with the state of Delaware, and we're going to have to pay, I think, a 4 or 4.5% tax. If I were regulated, I don't mind being registered and paying city taxes or whatever I need to do. But, we can't just make this a all or nothing situation because some people are upset, and there are some bad hosts. But, you can't penalize the people that are good people. And like Regina said, I had people from the Harris campaign. I have had families that, have had tragedies happen in their families that end up staying at Nemours Hospital and need a better place to stay that feels like a home for them and their families. I have never had a single problem. My neighbors always know that they can reach me directly if somebody acts up because my policies are very strict and they can get kicked out immediately. So, I mean, you can't, You know, there's people that do have no nonsense and care for the community. I mean, I've been neighbors with the same people for, 20 years. And I'm obviously not going to put somebody in there that is going to make their life uncomfortable or problematic. So, I think that we've got to be really careful. I think that having Airbnb people get registered with the city and paying what the rental people pay that do long-term rentals. I do also do long-term rentals, and having a license and paying city taxes. And to clarify something, Mr. Fields, Councilman Fields, to be clear that one cannot go on Airbnb to identify an address owner. The address is only revealed when booked, and the owner is identified by first name only, like the Airbnb legitimate businesses, and therefore agree that a business license, you can't go on Airbnb and find out how many Airbnbs are in the city. That just doesn't happen.
10 seconds.
But thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person here in chambers, Michelle Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be slightly different from the people before me. I actually do, council members, live right next door to not one, but 2 Airbnbs that have opened in the past month. I live on Shawcross Avenue. I've been there about 2.5 years. And we had a very unfortunate crime occur as a result of the chaos that was caused by one of the Airbnbs a month ago, which I'm sure you've read about. But what I'm telling you is when you live right next door to an Airbnb, it's either completely dark and empty for several days at a time. These are nightly mini hotels. They are not long-term rentals. They are not people that are coming from Spain for a week or people with children at the hospital. They're people that come for a night or two. As I saw this past weekend, there were 3 different residents in the house next door to me. Every night it turned over. It's a hotel. When someone comes to change over the room, there's a gentleman that comes in with boxes of, industrial strength toilet paper that you see. It's changing over a hotel room right next door to me. The difference is that there is no hotel manager there. There's no owner there. The owner next door lives in Connecticut, 2 doors over lives in Maryland. They're not around, and I guess you want to regulate, but then who's going to really watch over it? Me, the other neighbors. We're going to have to look around and see if there is a violation. Puts an undue burden on me to have to constantly wonder who's over there, who's next door, what's that noise, what do I smell, what's going on. And I'm not saying that I don't necessarily appreciate that there need to be Airbnbs, but you just rezoned a street. There's 10 houses on my side of the street, 2 of them are now hotel, 1/5 of that side of the street. And what I think you're going to do by this regulation, this ordinance that you're passing, is incentivize more. More people are going to come in. And I certainly don't want to live there any longer. So if I want to put my house on the market, someone's going to come in and turn that into an Airbnb. And you're going to have 3 in a row. You're going to change the entire culture, the entire structure of the neighborhood. From a neighborhood, a walkable neighborhood, where we can go to the church, go to the museums, go anywhere we want to do. I walk at night with my dog. There's 2 dark houses next door to me, or there's strangers in there that I don't even know, coming and going. No, neither of the owners next door have ever notified any of us of what they're doing, have never contacted us to say, hey, we're changing this over. So maybe they're not like the people that have spoken before me, who I'm sure are doing a wonderful job. But that's not what we're experiencing. And I think that this legislation is actually going to make it worse. You're going to incentivize more. And we are not going to just have the 770. We're going to have dozens more in our neighborhood. We have certainly tons of rental properties on the street and people who come live for a year or 2 or 3 years, or even for the people that the people before me mentioned, were there for 30 or 40 days. The resolution's about under 30 days. This is nightly changeover of a hotel room that's happening next door to me. And I think that what we're doing is this is the chance to get ahead of it now, instead of waiting to pass it and then have all of us be calling the police and the county to send inspectors here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathleen Sunt.
Hello. My name is Kathleen Sunt, and I've been living at 1901 Shellcross Avenue for 4 years. Just 4 row houses away from 2 Airbnbs, one which recently was the scene of chaos. While I appreciate the opportunity to speak, it's unfortunate this meeting was scheduled in a rush and is happening on this particular Monday, right after the Thanksgiving holiday, when the folks in our neighborhood are either returning from visiting family or tidying up after celebrating the holiday at their homes in 40 acres. But nonetheless, we have all responded to the very short notice and are here this evening. A neighborhood is defined as a district, especially one forming a community within a town or city. What makes a neighborhood for me is the people who live there and are invested in it. This sudden urge to approve Airbnb seems to be headed in one direction without thoughtfulness to the essence of a neighborhood. Transients who rent Airbnbs may be upstanding citizens, but they are in town for a wedding, a funeral, reunion, or another event, and are not visiting to contribute to the neighborhood. While we recognize the owners of the Airbnbs may be good people, they are not present and cannot contribute to the richness of our neighborhood. Having groups of folks that we do not know and will not get to know during their Airbnb stay seriously impacts our safety. Look no further than the recent event on Shallcross when one of our neighbors was seriously injured and sent to the hospital with facial trauma and a concussion, and who is still affected from that trauma. This event is a real symptom that is inherent in filling a neighborhood with transients. Creating hotel space in our residential neighborhood will drastically change and hurt our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Hines. Okay. Paula Warrington. Paula Warrington. It's my grandmother's name.
My name is Paula Warrington. I'm a lifelong Wilmington resident and the third generation of Warringtons to live on Shallcross Avenue. I grew up in that neighborhood, and the 40 acres is important to me. My uncle was the traffic superintendent for Wilmington for 40 years. My father worked for the Wilmington Police Department. I am ingrained in that neighborhood and in this city. I raised my daughter there. I'm helping to raise my grandson there, all in the same house. Our neighborhood is beautiful. It's filled with a diverse group of people who value being close to the center of a city, but also far enough away for a calm, quiet way of life. That's the way it's always been until recently. On October 25th, the home across from me was the site of an enormous house party. The house had been converted from a home to an Airbnb like a week before, and we were not told this. And this was the first indication we had that something like this was going on. There were teenagers all over the house, the porch, the backyards of other neighbors. There were over 50 of them, and just spilling out of the house. They were smoking pot. They were saying slurs to neighbors, and they also got into an altercation with someone who was there visiting. This man was driving a truck, and he was at one point on the porch fighting with them, then got back in his truck and drove up and down Shallcross at about 70 miles an hour, squealing tires. My boyfriend came out and said, "Slow down." He yelled, "Slow down." That's all he said. The man stopped the truck, jumped out, and assaulted my boyfriend. He literally strangled him till he was unconscious and just beat his face in. We went to the hospital, and the police came. When they finally came, there was nothing they could do. They said that they couldn't do anything to the Airbnb without the Airbnb, either them or the owner saying something. Now, we found out after, Airbnb knew that there was one of these mega parties happening or something nefarious happening. They did nothing. They did nothing to stop it, and they could have.
30 seconds.
54 years of calm on that street was just destroyed for me and for my boyfriend. We're living with a lot of trauma for this, and I know not every Airbnb owner is like this, but this is a problem. Please take some time to look at this before you make a decision.
Thank you. And we are really sorry to hear about that incident, and we wish him a speedy recovery. The next person would be Luke Bernhardt.
Good evening, council members. I think that a lot of the folks in this room haven't actually read the legislation. A lot of the problems that we're hearing actually are addressed with this bill, and this is not really friendly to the industry, to short-term rental operators at all. The first and foremost item that is not friendly is limiting to 3. So the latest version that was released limits hosts to a maximum of 3, and it does allow grandfathering for hosts that have already invested in these communities and neighborhoods. Licensing and regulation will deal with 99% of the issues that folks are bringing up, right? If the city of Wilmington and the police department actually have rules and regulations to fall back on to enforce, they'll enforce them. Right now, these properties are living in limbo, right? There's nothing there. So there is no barrier to entry. And what this legislation does is establish a barrier to entry and establishes a standard. What gets measured gets attended to. And right now, nobody's measuring. So I feel that by pushing this back or kicking it down the field, you're just going to delay the inevitable problem, which will continue to brew ill will against this type of property. I think we do need to enforce, or we need to give our law enforcement and our L&I professionals tools to shut these problems down when they do arise. It's very rare, right? Less than 1% of reservations have a problem. In 2024, there were 22,000 individual reservations inside the city limits of Wilmington, right? We've heard about 3 or 4 problems that happened. So it's a small number, but some of the frustrations with the police not being able to enact unless Airbnb does something, the city council right now can take control of that narrative and say, okay, we don't really care what Airbnb does. We're in charge of our city, and we're equipping our frontline personnel with the rules and regulations to shut these problems down when they happen. So parties happen. Parties happen in long-term rentals. Parties
30
happen
seconds.
in owner-occupied properties. So I think by not establishing any rules, by kicking this down the road for the next council to deal with, that's just going to elongate an issue and keep it brewing and festering. So thank you for your time
10
and consideration.
seconds. Thank you, Mr. Bernhardt. We're going to go to online. We have Kevin Malloy. Mr. Kevin Malloy.
Good evening. I'm here.
Okay.
Good evening. I have appreciated listening to everyone in the public and also the council and understand the reasoning for delaying this because it's a complex issue from different varying perspectives. But I must also say I've been an Airbnb host since 2016 in Vermont, Puerto Rico, where I am right now at my Airbnb, and in Delaware. I don't actively have any in Wilmington at this time, but I've had an incredibly great experiences from hundreds of guests that were part of the community, and they enjoyed the in-residence feel versus staying in a hotel. And I could go on, but I think one of the things that is really important in Wilmington is that we listened and talk with each other instead of just talking to each other. And the person who had that awful experience on Shawcross Avenue obviously needs to be listened to, and we need to address these issues that come up. It wasn't necessarily because it was an Airbnb, it was because there were people that were acting out of control, whether it could have been someone's private home, could have been a rental, could have been a short-term rental. So I think just to target Airbnb is the reason. Whenever I had, and I only had one really bad experience in the years, and I did involve the Wilmington Police, and I involved the Airbnb security, and they were interacting, and we actually included the ATF, so it was actually very effective. And I think one of the things that I need to always remind people that aren't familiar with Airbnb, it's a self-regulating platform, meaning that guests and hosts are reviewed constantly. So if you're a bad host, you will not attract good guests, and if you have violations, you can be taken off the program. And so it's not, and all the guests are vetted. So people know who is coming to their home or to their apartment. It's not random, like people just showing up. And if there are random people showing up, we do need to have legislation. And I respect the city council, this committee to promote
seconds.
and put this on the table now. The sooner we get regulations, the better. At least the 2% tax can be used to help with the housing crisis that does exist in Wilmington, the affordable housing. It could go to affording housing programs, things that could alleviate people that are not benefiting from this. But I do not think we should eliminate the Airbnbs by any stretch. We need to work with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Malloy. The next person on the list is Travis Fogelman.
Good evening, committee members. You've probably seen me here before. I'm also a short-term rental host. I've been doing it for 8 years. I also work at Christiana Care in surgery. Work right down the street at Wilmington Hospital. I'm in many neighborhoods, not just in 40 acres. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that's being said here. A lot of emotions running high, and as somebody who comes from a background of medicine, I like to look at data. I like to think rationally. I like to figure out solutions. Unfortunately, with human beings, it's much easier to come out with pitchforks against something than to actually come as a creative mind to create something constructive with input from everybody. I understand the party that happened a month ago in everybody that's here, the other half from one neighborhood. Conveniently, a fact was left out that the person that assaulted this poor woman's boyfriend is actually a resident of the neighborhood, which is rather unfortunate. When this incident happened, the Responsible Short-Term Rental Association actually kicked into gear to figure out exactly what happened, to mediate the problem. The host that hosted that guest was on scene immediately. They would have been evicted from the property earlier if the police had the tools to do so. Most people has not looked at this bill. And if they have, they would have known that it addresses a lot of the things that they're worried about. For instance, I'm so sick of hearing, almost everything that...
Excuse me, we can't, no talking from the public.
I'm not done speaking. I listened to all this misinformation.
Everyone gets to talk, no interruptions, please.
Councilman Field, everything he said was false information. And, I understand that he wants to read from the current city code and say that we're all illegal hotels. That's why we're here. That's why we're here having a voice. That's why we're here having a conversation. We would like to have it a two-sided conversation, not an agenda that one neighborhood is going to dictate what the other rest of the city is. And I have neighbors that are going to come and speak, business owners that have been next to my Airbnbs that would be very sad to see them go. One of my guests that just booked is spending the last couple of weeks with their daughter, has stage 4 breast
10
cancer.
seconds.
And needs to have a very, cozy home in order to spend the last days with her. Do you think those kind of people want to stay in a hotel? Why aren't they already staying in hotels?
Thank you, Mr. Travis, your time is up.
Thank you for my time.
Next person, Neil Hobbs.
council people, thank you very much for having this session tonight. My name is Neil Hobbs, and I live in the Triangle Square area. I moved there in 1975 in a rented apartment with a two-family apartment. The landlord put it up for sale about 7 years later, and I, along with a friend of mine, purchased the building. We've been living there ever since. My neighbor's house is a Airbnb for probably close to 2 years, I guess. I have made very good conversations with all of the people that have moved in there. They all have something in common because they're the same type of people that I am basically, you know, I like animals, they like animals, and they've been very friendly to me, and I've even pointed out to them different restaurants and things when they come into the neighborhood that they can go to, and they've all, in fact, they've told the Airbnb owner how nice their neighbor has been for them to be there and for the time that they've been there. And I have no objection to the Airbnb being there. And like I said, the people have all been very, very nice, and I just have had no negative experiences at all. Parking has been no problem. We have a shared driveway. They have never blocked me in. I have never blocked them in. And everyone has been very, very good, and the clientele has been very good. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Joseph Marvasi.
I will pass one.
Okay, thank you. Scott Johnson. Okay. Perry Peterson.
Okay, so I'll tell you, first of all, speaking in public is probably one of the most dreaded things I can imagine in my life.
You can do it.
But this issue hits home for me because as a resident of Wilmington since 1990, I've moved from Lovering to Broome to 17th. And I enjoy my home. I enjoy the peace I have in my home. Fortunately, at this time, we don't have an Airbnb on my neighborhood. But it really comes down to, I think, concerned that this is rushed through. I would have prepared something to speak to, but there was not enough notice because it was after the election, pushed through after the holidays, which is why some of my neighbors couldn't be here. But anyway, a lot of people have a lot of good stories about their Airbnbs. We have some bad experiences. Unfortunately, when you're opening a commercial business, it shouldn't be in a residential neighborhood. People make bad decisions. That doesn't become the burden of the residents. And like you said, Marie, you got liquor stores in the neighborhood, but the city will tell you where you can put that liquor store. Not in a residential neighborhood. Not by my house. I feel that this is pushed through. I don't think you're looking at your community that you're supporting. I think a lot of this support from our email conversation, excuse me, I don't like to speak in public. I know that you're getting your contributions from someone here who spoke, who owns 32 Airbnbs. He maxed out what he could contribute to you, and I think that's who you're catering to. I also don't appreciate that this is being pushed through by someone leaving the council. Maybe that's for someone else on council. I just think it's rushed, it needs to slow down, and I don't think we need to condone people that should never have had an Airbnb in a residential neighborhood in the first place. So sorry, I'm a little bit like whatever, but I tell you, I don't like to speak in public, but it's too important not to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I will address this real quickly. First of all, Councilmember Fields is still a councilwoman until January 6th. The inauguration takes place January 7th. She has every right to present whatever legislation she would like. Secondary, I have people in this room that are my friends, and they were my friends before I ran for office and before they became Airbnb owners. And if someone wants to support me, I will take that support. And there better be a whole lot more zeros next to that 6 before you think that my votes can be bought. Thank you. I will proceed to the next person, Aaron Wharton. I love you, Perry. We're friends, but you don't come in here to question my integrity and my character. We don't have to agree on the same issues, but we can be respectful, we can agree to disagree. Because everyone here is my constituent, and I represent all of the city. I have to listen to all of the voices, not just the voices that Mr. Field edges on and riles up with his advertisements and calling them personally. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, hi, I'm Erin Wharton, and I live in Wilmington, Delaware. I'm not prepared to talk because I just found out about this recently, so I apologize for that. But reading through what I could, and I called, is it Jim DePinto today? Just trying to figure out legality of getting a business, because I do live in town, and, you know, there are some little things that pop up that might not have their correct business licensing, like maybe like a dog walker or a babysitter or a daycare or something like that. But something as an Airbnb, I was told by Mr. DePinto that it's not allowed to be in a zoned residential neighborhood. So right off the bat, I would consider that an illegal business, an illegal hotel. Okay? That's the law. I would love to see maybe a city solicitor come and take a look. You were saying before that you were concerned that there'd be lawsuits if we had to force people out of their homes that they bought for these hotel scenarios, Airbnbs. But if they're starting to begin in an illegal manner, can I say that? Then why should we be concerned? I don't understand that. So I think we should look at it. I do think Airbnbs can be useful for travel and tourism, and there are some people that have spoke that have great properties that live here, maybe in appropriately zoned areas where they could be. I don't know, but again, that's why I think we need to slow down, pump the brakes, and take a look at this. What else was I going to say? I think that starting a business off the bat just because they're there, you don't then just go and say, all right, well, you're here, we can't do anything about it. So here's we're going to regulate you and we're going to collect taxes from you. So we'll make some money off of you, but you weren't supposed to be here to begin with. I mean, we wouldn't do that with a daycare center, right? We wouldn't do that with, if I decided to sell food out of my kitchen and have a restaurant. You know, are you going to shut me down because now, you know, are you going to tax me or are you going to shut me down? You know, so that's how I feel. And it's unfortunate that people were hurt. I don't think the regulations are in play. Even condo buildings, okay? I have a condo in a condo building.
20 seconds.
You're allowed to rent only a certain amount in the condo building because it changes the dynamic of it. So what about talking in the neighborhood so there's not 5 in one block? What about taking an issue and looking to see, all right,
10
well,
seconds.
if we're going to allow some in a commercial area, you're allowed to have this many per radius. Something to keep the neighborhood intact. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Michael Lazan. But to answer your, I'm sorry, it was Laverne Herrero? Laverne, are you here? Nope. Okay, let's go to Michael Lazan. Thank you. But real quickly, the reason is because when they popped up, short-term rentals were never a thing back then. None of the cities had any regulations. And I understand that then we should be following the regulations that we have because they're in there. It says you're not allowed to do this, do that. But back then, I don't even know what they would be considered. What were they then when they first came in? And the problem here is that they were allowed to run for so many years without any regulations. What cities across America did, including Wilmington, is they knew that it was going to be an issue at one point, but they just didn't deal with it. They just kicked the can down the road. And I understand what you're saying. Let's take more time if we need to, make amendments, get more input. But we don't want to keep kicking the can. That's the bottom line.
Can I make a comment to that?
May I respond real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
When you said they moved in years ago and were allowed to start this business, they were allowed by Airbnb, not by the state of Delaware.
The city encouraged.
The city
highlighted local businesses.
Well, then the city should have then, like Mr. DePinto.
Excuse me. We just need to, we have to
But
go
thank
with
you,
this next.
thank you,
Thank
yeah.
you so much.
And normally we don't have the interactions, but I just wanted to be fair in that response.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Councilman Field. Yeah, Mr. Michael Lazan. Well, let's let Mr. Michael Lazan make his comments.
I'll be quick.
Yes, it's okay. It's your time. You have 3 minutes.
That's fine. As far as I see it, it's a hotel. It's a business. It's zoned as commercial. If it's in R1 to 5, it's non-compliant. That's it.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Councilmember Field?
I mean, I'm just, you were giving commentary based on a comment. I'll wait until the end of public comment because I have some comments on a lot of the comments here.
Okay, next, I have to say, even though I'm very good at handwriting, this name has me a little stumped. Begins with a B. I think that could be an A or an H.
Pass.
You? That's you? You did not go to Catholic school, right? Good. All right. Yes, did you want to speak? No. Okay.
Brian Gallagher.
All right. Is it Gallagher?
Gallant.
Gallant. Okay. Okay, we'll fix that later. Next, we have this Bozier. Bozheir.
First name?
No, that's Bob Weir.
Oh.
Courtney Messina. Courtney Messina, yeah. And then we'll do an online after this.
Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney Messina, and I am a Wilmington resident. I've been in Delaware my whole life and been in the city limits for the past 5 years. I don't actually currently own any Airbnb properties, but I do want to come on here to say that I am in support of this bill. I am in support of regulation. I'm an Airbnb superhost. I have ended up building a business out of the past 3 years that, you know, not only my livelihood is dependent on, but it's a very tightly run ship that we run. We take things very seriously. And it's not just my livelihood, it's my business partners, it's our team members, it's our clients. I love Wilmington. And some of the council members in here can vouch for that. They've seen me at events, I'm a participant. I love Wilmington. So I'm just here to say that I support the legislation, but I think that an outright ban needs to be reconsidered. I think that there needs to be parameters, but they need to be fair. So, you know, and to those that are not in support of Airbnbs, I just want to say, you know, I hear your concerns. I think that the incidences that have taken place are really unfortunate, and you know, I feel for you. I feel for you guys, but an outright ban is, I don't think, the right move. And how much time do I have? You know, I think fair legislation that takes everybody's concerns into consideration is what makes most sense. You know, a lot of us here, Airbnb hosts, this is like our livelihood. This is either our first job or our second job because things are hard out there. Things are difficult. And some people have to work a second job and start a second business just to support their families. So it's just something to keep in mind that depending on how we choose to go about this, it can create a wide ripple effect.
30 seconds.
That could really negatively impact a lot of constituents and their livelihood, their income, and those that rely on our businesses for their income. You know, so that's all I want to say. And one more thing, you know, I love Wilmington. And there has,
10 seconds.
In addition to that, the numerous guests that have passed through also have fallen in love with Wilmington and have bought houses here.
Time's up.
Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. We have Christian Willauer online. Christian Willauer is our.
Hi.
Are you there, Christian?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Hi, my name is Christian Willauer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This ordinance creates regulation, but not enough. In a small city with a limited number of homes, converting homes into Airbnbs impacts the availability of homes for regular residents. We need guardrails against how much of our housing stock can become short-term rentals because our neighbors need places they can live full-time. A quick look at neighboring cities gives good examples of how this law could be better. In unincorporated parts of Newcastle County, they only allow short-term rentals in commercial, industrial, or business park areas. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, distinguishes between Airbnbs where the owner lives there and where the owner is absentee. Lancaster considers absentee-owned units a commercial use and restricts them to a commercially zoned district. Philadelphia requires registration and an 8.5% lodging tax on all revenue, not like 2% like is in this law or in the proposed law. Newark, New Jersey allows Airbnbs, but the property must be owned by the host and be their principal residence. This is a really important topic that needs further discussion before being made law. I hope you will table this legislation to be taken up next session.
Thank you. Jesse Murphy? And I'm sorry I failed to recognize that was Christian Willauer, Councilwoman-elect for the 5th District.
Hi there, my name is Jessie Murphy. I guess I'm one of the outsiders in the room. I am not a Wilmington resident. I live outside of the city. However, I do work here, spend money here, and employ people who live here. I am a business partner of Courtney Messina, and a couple years ago I didn't know much about short-term rentals or Wilmington. Unfortunately, my opinion of Wilmington was just the negative things that people had shared with me. I guess kind of there was a bad reputation. My mindset and my opinion of the city has completely changed since I've been kind of enveloped in this world. My community is so much more richer. I have these amazing colleagues. I meet people from around the world. I'm closer with my neighbors. And yeah, it's overall just been an amazing experience. It's really unfortunate that these incidents, really, really terrible thing has happened. And someone got really hurt, and that is a shame. Fortunately, those incidents are rare and few, far in between. We work really hard to try to make sure that our properties are safe for everyone involved. I don't think that right now there is a conversation of a ban, at least I hope not. I think that would be absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, Airbnb is something that's part of our world nowadays. We're not going back in time. Short-term rentals are a part of our present and our future, and I think regulating them and making sure that things are in place to keep everyone safe and benefiting the community and the homeowners who are able to receive this extra income from it. I hope that we're able to put something in place that can keep people safe and happy. I am a businesswoman. I am very numbers focused. I think that it would be a huge error if the city was to not capitalize on this. I know that money is not the main focus of this. It's making sure that the community stays beautiful and to its roots. I do think that that can be achieved with the appropriate legislation. I do support this bill 100%. And I hope that we are able to make this legitimate. I don't like feeling like I am pushing drugs by having someone, stay in a room in my house. I don't like feeling like I'm doing something that's wrong. In fact, I'm helping people find housing for their sick families. And, you hear the stories. But yeah, so I would love to be able to kind of operate in the daylight and help the city make some money from it while we have formed RESTRA, the Responsible Short-Term Rental Association. We have rules in place, and we do recognize that this is ongoing. And yeah, people cannot go
10 seconds.
Without being monitored. We really do need rules in place, and I think this is a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have David Storm.
Hi, David Storm, 8th District. I oppose this ordinance for multiple reasons. I could go on and on about the nightmare of living next to an Airbnb and having 800 people a year come in and out of the property next door, share a wall with you, maybe share your backyard, all that stuff. I'm not going to go into that right now anymore. What needs to happen with this ordinance, it needs to be tabled because it's a bad ordinance. It's just a bad ordinance. It creates a permit for Section 34 of the City Code. Section 34 of the City Code falls below Section 48 of the City Code, which is zoning. Zoning, as Councilman Field specifically said, is specific, very clear. R1 through R5, I sent an email about this. R1 through R5, non-owner occupied short-term rentals, which are considered boarding houses, are illegal. R2, A, and R4, non-owner occupied short-term rentals or boarding houses, are allowed. All commercial properties, they are allowed. The City Code, enforcement of the City Code, would bring Wilmington in line with every other municipality nearby. Christian Welcome made a good point about Lancaster. I would say Dover, too. Philadelphia actually outlaws short-term non-owner occupied rentals. Boston does, New York does, Baltimore, Arlington, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Newcastle County, all of them. So I don't understand when people are defending. I'm just, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So it violates zoning. The reason why this is a mess is, should it pass, when the new administration comes into the mayor's office and license and inspection gets a whole bunch of calls about these permits, what are they going to do, shut all these properties down? They're going to be overwhelmed. You can ask Captain Rosario about other troubles that the people have had. People begin calling the cops all the time. It's just a disaster. Just focus on, if you're going to amend Section 34 of the code, you have to amend Section 48. So this is why it's complex. It needs to be tabled, passed in January, February, when City Council has had a long time to review and think about this, come up with something that's tight, and that's what I'm going to say. You don't want to write something that all it's going to do is invite lawyers, lawsuits, people fighting back and
20
forth
seconds.
with permits that they shouldn't have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storm. John O'Connor.
I'm John O'Connor. I live at 1317 West 8th Street. I live in the Cool Springs area. I've renovated 8 homes in the Cool Springs area and sold them. These were vacant homes that need a lot of work. And I sold them to homeowners, the majority of it. But I did keep one of them. Now I turned it into an Airbnb. I have a property manager who's here. This was a vacant home that was in, I spent like $70,000 renovating it. It's been an asset to the community. So the only thing I have to say is to any regulation is don't over-regulate anything we do. And also, I know we had one instance in 4 years where we had to call the police on an Airbnb guest who, or short-term rental guest, who overstayed his stay and wouldn't leave. And the police did not know what to do, you know. And I know it's been different depending upon where, what Airbnb or short-term rental in the community there was. So any law has to have in there what happens when the police are called. And the police said you got to go to court. The court says you got to go to the police. You know, it was back and forth for a couple months for me on the whole thing. But besides that, the Airbnb has provided 40% of my retirement income, and my property manager, I think it's provided a majority of his income. And you know, we are very careful who we get in as guests, and we made one mistake in 4 years on the whole thing. I'd rather have it empty than get a bad guest in there. So I support some kind of regulation, but don't over-regulate it, and there has to be some kind of police. The police have to know that if a guest overstays or there's a problem with a fight or anything like that, the police has to be, know what to do. But that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I definitely agree. Bridget Storm?
Hi, I'm Bridget Storm. You heard from my husband already. We live on 1700 block of North Burn Street. And yes, we do live next to an Airbnb, but I want to address the fact that multiple people have said that people who are here haven't read the city code. Not only have I read this ordinance, I've provided feedback to the council on things that I think that it could do differently. I don't think this is an adequate piece of legislation. I think that, you know, the 2% is not enough. As my husband mentioned, L&I is going to be overwhelmed. We need a higher tax that can be split between affordable housing, L&I, police, beautification. There are all these things that add to the neighborhood, and if we do not provide for them, then this is going to continue to be a nuisance. So I do not think that this ordinance goes far enough. I don't want an Airbnb next to me. I live in a residential zone. I bought in a residential zone because I wanted to be residential. I did not want any commerce in my neighborhood. That's why I bought specifically where I bought. And when I brought up my concerns to council, I was told, well, we can't ask them to sell their houses. I'm not asking them to sell their houses. I'm asking them to consider converting to a long-term rental. I am not asking them to sell their houses, but I am being told in no uncertain words, and nobody said this directly, but it's the implied meaning, that if I don't want to live next door to an Airbnb, my only recourse is to sell my home, which is completely absurd and unfair. And I really hope that this council really considers that and considers the fact that we bought residences in a residential neighborhood because we wanted a residential lifestyle. And if that is not considered, then this city is just doing its residents a huge disservice. Huge disservice. And I just really think that, you know, I'm not saying they need to be banned. I've never once said that they need to be banned, but they need to be regulated. And the bill, no ordinance should pass until it specifically states how L&I is going to regulate it and how the police are going to regulate it when things come up. Until the zoning is clarified, until the regulation with L&I and police is regulated, is clearly defined, this ordinance doesn't do it.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kelly Hughes.
Hello there, council people. I am Kelly Hughes. I am the president of the 40 Acres Civic Association for the last 3 years. It's a fun job because I get a lot of complaints and a lot of good things too. And I had a lot to say when I was driving down here, and then I've been listening to everybody. So they've all said a lot of the things that I was going to say. So I'm going to be a little bit more neutral right now. I don't think a ban is what anybody's really looking for. I think it is restriction and regulation. I'm a businesswoman of 30 plus years, and what I just got from this meeting is pump the brakes, let's talk about it. January is not that far away. Sit down, talk to people like me who listens to all of the neighbors, and Lisa Johnson from Trolley Square, and whoever Spadola's over was, I don't know who's in that area, near the triangle. But, yeah. Just sit down and around a big table and let's talk about it. Let's put something good in place. And I wasn't going to say this, but I have to. I'm a businesswoman, and I am ashamed of the way that you all speak to one another. Mm-hmm. He is just doing his job. He cares very much about our city. I would never speak to my employees the way that you guys have made him feel tonight. And he drives me crazy sometimes. and he knows that. But he loves our city, and he's listening to us. He's not coming up with this. This is the people who live in our district are hammering him all the time about this. And I would just hope that you all could, you're supposed to work together. You're supposed to be a team. So, thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Kavar.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas Kabar, and I just want to start by saying thank you, and I'm sorry about your boyfriend. I hope he's feeling better. I just wanted to share my experience. I own Scout Cafe out in Triangle area. I know a lot of you guys. I've seen you there. Thank you all. I just want to share my experience and how I feel about Airbnb. I'm an avid traveler, and everywhere I go, I stay at an Airbnb. Sorry, I hate public speaking, so this is a lot.
Great.
Thank you. So I just want to say that everywhere I go, I stayed in Airbnb, and it's essential for me to get to know the community where I'm staying. It's a part of why when I moved here from Canada, I stayed at Airbnbs in this area, in Philly, everywhere I went, to get to know everyone and get to be a part of the community. And without Airbnb, I would not have maybe chosen to move here. What we do at Scout Cafe is offer community, and a big part of our community is our travelers. We have a lot of people that come and support our business, many businesses here, because they can stay at Airbnb very close to our businesses, very close to where we want them to stay, the hospital, lawyers' offices, and so on and so forth. Again, I'm sorry that some people have experienced negative experiences with this. And as Kelly said it very well, this is the time to talk to one another, not point fingers and make others feel horrible. That incident is a wake-up call to talk to one another, not to jump at each other's throats. Thank you for everything you guys have done, and I hope you guys consider it. I am for maybe some regulations, just not a complete ban, because that will affect all of our businesses. It will affect the city. It will affect the taxes that we actually pay towards the city as residents and as guests and as people that care about the city. Thank you all.
Thank you. Paul Seitz. Luann Haney.
I'm Luann Haney. I thought I was signing an attendance sheet, not a speaker sheet, but okay.
We'll take you.
I'll take it. I want to say, I believe there should be regulation, but I believe this regulation, which I've read, the proposal, as written, is way premature. We need, as everyone is saying, more talk, more community involvement, more transparency, to hear more voices. And to me, the critical thing, and other people have mentioned this, the city of Wilmington has black letter law on its books about zoning. And unless your proposed ordinance, I think, gets legal counsel involved and decides the hierarchy of, does the zoning prevail over the Airbnb or vice versa? Like other people here, I've lived on Gilpin Avenue for many years, like 40. I love it there. I feel safe, but I lived next to an Airbnb for a while, and it was misery. It was, I won't tell all the stories because you all have it in email anyway, but I really think if people bought to live in a residential neighborhood and the zoning is to prevail legally, then your ordinance has to work out the mechanics of how you deal with stuff that's there illegally. But first and foremost, you need to assure homeowners of whether you're going to respect the zoning that's on the books or not. And that to me is the real issue that drives the whole future of both owner-occupied and other properties. So that's all I wanted to say. Please get somebody to look at the law that's already on the books and decide what to do about the places that don't comply with it. Thank you.
Thank you. David Hill.
So like Luann, I thought I was signing a sign-in sheet, like I'm back in school, so here I am.
Oh, you guys could pass if you want, but you're more than
That's
welcome.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for being
So I'm in 1940 Gilpin. We've been there for 26 years. Unfortunately, I had a number of bad experiences with the Airbnb that was next to us. Fortunately, in working with Councilman Fields and others, we were able to work with the owner as well and realized that he did not run a good Airbnb, so it was eventually turned back into a long-term rental. I guess my biggest problem is I just struggle with the 4 business days to try and pass something through here. You know, with such an issue and so many turning out, obviously it's a real hot button, and it's just, there's a lot more to look at, a lot more involvement, a lot more buy-in could happen with the community. And I think that needs to happen before this moves forward at all. I don't need to go out of my house on a Friday night when I'm relaxing with my wife and pull a man off a woman who's beating her in his car and then hold the man back, and then have my wife stay up the entire night because she's worried about retaliation, because you don't know who's next to her. So it's many stories I could share, but it really, you don't need to ban them like people have said, but greater regulation, greater consequences around this. And right now, that as it stands, it's not quite there yet. So thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Christy Hill.
David is my husband. I'm Christy Hill, 1940 Gilpin Avenue. One of the things that I find interesting is that everybody's talking about the incident on Shallcross like it's something new. And the incident that David's talking about happened long before that. And the incidences that we endured living next to the Airbnb on Gilpin Avenue were many, were dangerous, and culminated in a huge party with a man beating the hell out of a woman in her car, and my husband had to pull him off of her. And the problem with that is that I have a working relationship with the owner, and I contacted the owner. Every time there was a problem, if it was 3 a.m., the mayor heard from me, Nathan heard from me, the owner heard from me, everybody heard from me. In the beginning, I didn't call the police because they have better things to do than babysit people trashing houses. But obviously, we called the police when the man beat up the woman on our front lawn. He pulled her out of the car and beat her up on the front lawn. So these incidents are not new. They've been going on for a long time. If you look at the research, you'll see that many of the cities had so many issues with stuff like this that that's why they started pulling back. So I agree, there needs to be more. It needs to be discussed more. It needs to be, there needs to be more restriction. And I wish all the Airbnb owners that we've heard from today lived next to me, because that's not, they're saying our incidents are not the norm, but I live 1 block over from Shallcross where we're having that incident. And like everybody else, I don't understand, if I'm a constituent of this city, why are the businesses that just started more important than my peace of mind and my life in the house that I've lived in for 26 years? Because it was the first time in 26 years that my husband and I said, time to leave the city. I don't want to leave the city. I want to live in the house where I raised my daughter. She went to school at St. Anne's.
10 seconds.
She's a junior at Padua. I want to stay in my home. I don't want to be pushed out because there's no legislation or rushed legislation.
Thank you. Mark, is it Rourke or Kirk? Is there a Mark Kirk? Okay. Jamila Davy.
Good evening, council members. I am Jamila Davy, and I'm a resident
and I'm a renter here in Wilmington, and I want to kind of echo the few folks that have spoken to the issue of housing affordability and wanting to ask council what steps you have taken to consider how this legislation will impact affordability. Because I've done a little bit of online research, and everything that I see shows that increased Airbnbs mean rent goes up and affordable housing stocks go down. And I'm totally here for hearing about people's livelihoods. And I know so many of us, we all use Airbnbs. I was in one this week. It was an owner-operated one that would have fit like a residential status. But we also had to think about prioritizing. I appeal to you as someone who's been out there talking to residents and who, is, making ends meet herself, to prioritize what it's going to take to make Wilmington remain affordable for regular residents. And that's the reason, and that's what motivates me to speak here today. I think there can be common sense regulation. I appreciate that that's what council's trying to do. It's trying to get their hands around this issue. I want to agree with Bridget and Christian and others who mentioned that the tax rate doesn't seems way below what we would want it to be. I think the last bill had 3%, right? So, it's a ballpark for that. And I did a little bit of search online too, and I see cities, we talked about Philly being 8.5, and I know we have to add the state tax on there too, so it's going to go up to, but the 2 would be 6.5, right, already. But I see Chicago, Chicago taxes everything, but they have hotel tax, they have vacation rental, and they have a domestic violence surcharge on theirs. Like I did see out there, you can do affordable housing mitigation fees on there as well. We could dedicate funding to that as part of this. I also want to agree with folks who are speaking to the zoning issue and the idea that we're calling this residential rental regulations, because if we don't have any proprietors live in these spaces, it's a commercial endeavor, right? So I think we should get the language to meet and match what the legislation is doing. Maybe there's more creative ways to expand the owner occupancy.
30 seconds.
Category 2, for if you've lived in the property over the past few years or something like that, to expand that a little bit. But I want to just agree with everyone who's saying we need to look at this some more. I think there should be caps. And I really think council should look at affordability. Like, put some time into it, look at other cities, and make sure that that is at the top of the list when we look at making Airbnbs work in this ecosystem. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And we have one last speaker. Is it Athena? The last name begins with a V. Maybe Vetkos.
I just want to say that we do have one other person who would also like
Oh, please come forward. And if you could, if you could state your name, and I'll go ahead and put you on the list.
All right. My name's Joel McLaughlin.
Joel McLaughlin.
I moved to Wilmington in 2014. And shortly thereafter became a host. So
welcome.
I've been hosting for quite some time. But prior to moving here, I did residential flips. I worked in Hedgeville, Browntown, Cool Springs, Quaker Hill, the Triangle, and got to know the city pretty well, and took a lot of the worst looking houses you've ever seen and turned them into pretty interesting houses before Airbnb existed. So I look at this, I have a different set of glasses I look at it. I think there's a prime example when you compare long-term rentals and short-term rentals. There's a whole system for landlords with points and L&I and permitting, and I did all my work via permitting. I even lost the house in Regina's neighborhood because I had to follow the laws. There was I think the gentleman that bought it is here right now, which is interesting. But that house is right next to a group home. A couple things I heard people say could help the council members do some research. Somebody mentioned in-home daycare. Maybe it's been decades since that's been an issue, but If you think about it, when in-home daycare first started, there were no regulations. Would you want to have a daycare home right next to you? I don't know, but that whole industry evolved just like short-term rentals. That's a primary to look in. I want to say when I first came here, I moved into the house I bought in Quaker Hill. Laura Semmelroth had just created the Creative Arts District in Quaker Hill. I was one of several Airbnb hosts that the city was celebrating that we were there. We were featured and put on the cover of Out and About magazine. Way to go, a new business in downtown Wilmington. I've had thousands of guests, doctors, lawyers, CFOs, CEOs. Over a dozen of my guests have become residents, bought houses in Trinity, Shallcross, right on Shallcross Street. The pastor of the Unitarian Church stayed with me for 2 months.
10 seconds.
So I think there's some I'm not in favor of this legislation as is, but you got to start somewhere. So hurry up and start somewhere, because I think everybody's waiting for some success and a path to follow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else online, Anita? Anyone? Okay, if you come up and state your name. Okay.
I am Jen Mensch. I have been a resident in the Highlands for 30 years. So I have a renter next door to me, long-term renter, and no problem. So I'm all for that. The only one item I wanted to mention, because lots of good statements were made tonight that I'm not going to repeat, but what I understand is with Airbnbs, you're not supposed to be renting it more than 90 days in a whole year, whether that's consecutive or peppered throughout the year. That's it. If people are making their livelihood on this, like, shift to long-term rentals. I think most people are comfortable, and like the one gentleman was just mentioning, we've got the rules and regs in place. We can honor that. So I just think when you're exploring and looking at all the different dimensions, which I don't envy your job, because I know you have a lot of work to do to figure this out, and but I think I'm confident we're going to get to a win-win, so we can accommodate the ladies that do or the people out there that do a great job with Airbnbs, whether it's in the commercial district, whatever. I think there is a place for it. We just need to have the teeth around it that we can enforce so the right things happen and we don't have safety risks. We don't kind of pollute the community, that sort of a thing. So I think we can get there. We just need to think about a lot of the different dimensions. Thank you.
Can you state your name again, please?
Jennifer Mensch.
Thank you. And I'll repeat again the name that I have here, Athena.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a sign-up sheet.
Oh, okay, all right, so, fine. Okay, if you can come forward and state your name, please.
Hi, Laura Hercolo. I'm the Vice President of the Charlie Square Community Association, and agree with everything we're saying. Just wanted to get on the record that I do.
Laura, last
yes.
name?
Hercolo, Herkalo. Just want to, really say let's table this now. I think a lot of good ideas are coming out of here, and it would not be a good idea to rush through this. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I believe that is one more person. Okay. All right, this will be our last public comment, and then we have President Congo has his hands up, and then Councilman Field.
Good evening, council members. Many of you know who I am.
Yes, let me have your name.
My name is Carol Pye Banks. I am a longtime Wilmingtonian. I've lived here all my life. My family migrated here from Virginia for a better life. We settled in Philadelphia first, and my grandmother decided to move us to Wilmington because she did not want her 2 sons involved with Philadelphia gang wars. I am a community activist serving the 3rd District first, where I own a home, and then was forced into the 2nd District, where I live and own a home. I lived a couple doors down from Senator Henry way back when. I left the 3rd District to go to the 2nd District due to increased criminal activity, such as drugs, graffiti, and loitering in the development I live called Elliott Run, and the Concord Avenue corridor, which is the gateway into Wilmington. Number 1, Delaware Crime-Free Multi-Housing Program Phase 1, administered by the Department of Justice, headed by Daniel Logan. This program was mandatory, but failed to carry out its mission completely. Number 2, I became a host, Airbnb host, in 2017 after experiencing one of my tenants overdosed in my rental home, leaving behind a 7-year-old little boy. And at my personal residence, my roommate turned my home into a revolving door for his rich, well-to-do friends, who were all driving Porsches, Mercedes, and BMWs. My son told me again, for the 50th time, "Mom, you should do Airbnb." So I did my research before launching my first Airbnb in my
45
personal
seconds.
home. Impressed, predominantly run by women age 55 and up, mostly women, 60% and 40% men. I serve 3 insurance companies who use my Airbnbs.
30 seconds.
I have about 23 Airbnbs. Most of them are in Wilmington, in the Concord Avenue area, Baynard Village, and Cool Spring. I serve families who have been misplaced by fires. I also have homeless families in my Airbnbs.
10 seconds.
Long term with this, I do short term and long term, and I intend to convert these Airbnbs back into viable tenants. The neighbors there are satisfied, they're happy, they see the change in the neighborhood, the crime is down. It's been excellent.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. At this time, that concludes public comment. We have President Congo online. You can proceed, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to thank everyone who gave public comment this evening. A lot of really good, interesting points that I think we all have to consider. I also want to say that, I'm sorry for the situation, for the traumatic situations that those who have had them concerning Airbnbs and just kind of in general have had to experience. And I think it's our responsibility as a council and working with the administration to try to alleviate those experiences as much as we can. And unfortunately, I won't be able to support this. I think that so many people this evening have just talked about we need more time to get it right. I don't know if we'll ever come to a perfect place, but I think we have to come to a place that's fair to both sides. I am for Airbnbs, honestly, but I've never had to live next to one, so I don't know the experiences that some people have shared with us this evening. So I want to be fair to them also. I also don't want to cut off the financial lifeline of people who depend on Airbnbs. And I think at the core of it is, does this legislation attempt to put any parameters around something that may be illegal? So I just think we need a lot more conversation. We have to talk to our zoning board. We need to talk to the administration. And one gentleman who said that the administration welcomed him with open arms. Well, I'm not going to say the administration, but the magazines that welcomed him with open arms. And now we're saying we might have to cut him off. So we know we need regulations. We need to know what that means to everybody, to the police, to LNI, to the neighborhoods. So I just think this has to be dealt with during our next session. I believe any council member can present legislation whenever they feel is right, but I just think there's just too much to talk about still. So I won't be voting this out of committee tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Field?
I do think this is a good discussion tonight. A lot of facts on the table. My name has been called multiple times, so I've been taking notes, and I just want to run through 6 points. So I think we need to look at what the actual ordinance says, and it was stated that it limits to 3 per owner. I don't, that's not my interpretation. If you have a copy, I point you to page 3, where it says, where the definition of owner and it says it shall also include artificial entities as long as that artificial entity owns no more than 6 short-term rentals. And then if we go to page 4, sort of towards the bottom, section 34-350, it says ownership in whole or in part by any artificial entity, including but not limited to a corporation, trust, LLC, is limited to 6 short-term rentals per artificial entity. So I read that as endorsing unlimited ownership, because anybody can set up as many LLCs as they want. So somebody could have 600 Airbnbs according to this document. So again, the critique of this is this ordinance, and it's not 3 per owner. It's basically 6 per LLC, and there's no restrictions on how many LLCs one person can have. The second, one of the questions is how many Airbnbs are there in the city? And the number stated was 770. When we talked about this in April and May, the number that was reported was somewhere about 150 to 200. I think it's about 200 to 250. There's about 30 in the 8th district, and I think that's the district that has the most. So I think what we're looking at is somewhere about 200 to 250. And that distinction is important because I don't want to, it's definitely a growing issue, but it's not 770 as far as I can tell from the data. And that can be perceived as inflating the extent to which we have to just accept this. The third point, no one has ever called for an outright ban, ever. Not in April and not now. So I just want to clarify that. I have never. I don't know of anybody that has said that there will be an outright ban on Airbnbs in the city of Wilmington. Then the argument that we have to register them to find out how many there are. I think it would take 2 city employees or 2 neighborhood volunteers about 2 days of work to identify all Airbnbs in the city, go to the recorder of deeds, figure out who the registered owner is, and determine exactly with extreme precision how many there are. Number 5, I hear from the Airbnb owners, and I don't really even like being in this situation because I know some of you and I respect all of you, and it's a contentious situation. One point that I think that it's important in the spirit of communication, when people around Airbnbs are upset about them, they're not calling the Airbnb owners or operators because they probably don't know who they are. They're calling their council people. And they are definitely calling me as the district council person, maybe more so than the at-large council people, but that's just something important. So I read the reviews and they're generally positive, but that doesn't mean that the people around those Airbnbs might not be extremely upset about them. And finally, there's also the notion that Airbnb touts that they will, they're these great partners of the municipalities. And it was stated by one commenter that the Airbnb license will be pulled if there's violations. So we did try and communicate with Airbnb. In April, their representative kind of reached out to us, and there were several problem Airbnbs, and we said, because they were saying, we'll shut it down. Don't worry, we'll shut it down if there's problems. So we said, okay, here's the problem. And then they said, well, we need to have, how can we take your word for it that your city is saying it's illegal? We need a formal document. So we got that document from the city and we handed it to the Airbnb representatives, and it was dodge and evasion and no response, and we need another week. So I personally have very limited confidence in the ability or will of the platform to do anything about it, which is why I feel just extreme skepticism that this is the right document. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilman Field. Councilman Spadola?
Yeah, I just want to say my comments are to the Airbnb platforms because this legislation is going to be defeated tonight, I'm confident. And I want them to know that their short-term game of ignoring the city and city cease and desist letter is going to cost them in the long term. So it's time for them to come to the table, shut down their problem properties, and be a good neighbor.
Thank you. I did want to point out, and maybe there is an issue with the legislation where it says one thing in one part and another, but it does say ownership limits, a maximum of 3 short Rental units may be owned by any combination of individual and/or artificial entity, and that this limit cannot be circumvented by creating multiple artificial entities, and grandfather operators would not be included in that. So if there is a discrepancy there, then that needs to look into, but 3 is the number that it says there, and you cannot just make up another entity and just have different multiple businesses be the same person owning it. So it does make a provision for that.
Well, that's not clear, the document.
Yeah, I think there's two, the legislation is contradicting itself unless the law department just didn't change the number. Okay, maybe he doesn't have the right copy then. Okay, so that was changed from the 6 to the 3 with the last edit. Councilmember Fields, I'll turn it over to you unless any, Councilmember White, you have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the comments offered in the room. I think they were very interesting. Some circled around the ban, and I don't think this legislation does that. But some good points that are brought up in terms of operating a commercial entity in a residential setting. I think that's something obviously the council and this administration should take a look at. This legislation also allows for grandfathering of existing Airbnbs to remain operational. But now we come to the question, no regulation does not, I think, help anybody. I think this is an attempt, a rightful attempt to regulate this nascent business to the best of its ability. This legislation can be amended, it can be changed at any time by through council. But to leave here, as I begin this conversation, you know, quite honestly, I do not want an Airbnb next to me. Do not want it. But with that said, I really don't want an unregulated Airbnb next to me. So I think this is no doubt a complex issue, and I really, you know, learned a lot through the comments in this room. And I think that it presents an opportunity for council to move forward. I think the regulation allows for a step in the right direction. If we chose to ignore it, Madam Chair, I think that gets us nowhere. And I think council in its organizational structure can manage those issues that seem to be whether it's zoning, whether it's commercial use or long-term rental. But I think this is legislation allows for a first step. So I will be supporting legislation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman White. All right, if there are no other comments from the council members, I turn it over to the legislation sponsor, Councilmember Fields.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, for all your comments, your issues, and your concerns concerning this piece of legislation. I'm not sure if everyone has received the updated piece of legislation. When it says owner means natural person, including a single member LLC or a locally owned artificial entity, multiple member LLC or corporation that is not publicly traded, is not a subsidiary of a publicly traded company, and primarily operates in Newcastle County. This restriction is intended to prevent the concentration of short-term rental owners by a single entity or associated business, thus limiting the potential for market dominance or monopolistic practices. The term owner shall not include a person holding only a leasehold interest in the property. They must have a valid Delaware ID or driver's license. Short-term rental owner permit. This was implemented. No natural person under the age of 18 may own property used as residential short-term rental. Entity ownership by an artificial entity, multiple member LLC or corporation must meet the following criteria. 1, local ownership. The entity must be locally owned, not publicly traded, not a subsidiary or a publicly traded company. Primary operation. The entity's primary operation must be within Newcastle County. Delaware identification. Again, the entity must have a valid Delaware ID or driver's license. ownership limit. A minimum of 3 short-term rentals may be owned by an individual or artificial entity. The limit cannot be circumvented by creating multiple official entities. Grandfather operators or properties are not included in the ownership limit. Grandfather clause. Residential short-term rentals operating before the enactment of the legislation will be grandfathered, provided the operators obtain the necessary license and comply with all regulations. Documentation of property listed on a public site in the year 2024 or earlier are required for grandfathering. Purpose: the restriction aims to prevent market dominance and monopolistic practices by limiting ownership concentration in short-term rentals. Let me see. I just want to address something. I heard a lot of people say that the funds that we will be getting from the short-term rentals, we don't know where it's going to go, or we're not going to get it. I have to say that the city cannot, earmark where the money goes. But I have suggested, please listen, and they told me I had to take it out because we can't earmark money, but this was in the legislation. The tax shall be distributed as follows. 25% goes to the real estate department for the home repair lottery. 25% of the finance, 25% to the finance department to assist city residents with delinquent water and tax bill orders. 25% to enforcement, and 25% to the general fund. Any unused home repair lottery, delinquent water, and tax bills will transfer to the general fund at the end of each fiscal year. So, I was told that I had to take that out because we cannot earmark the money. We cannot earmark where the money goes. And I just want to say, I understand, like I said, I understand where everyone is coming from. My only thing is I wanted to make sure that we had some type of regulation around the short-term rentals. I have to say, I asked that we, I did put in there that we strongly suggest and encourage the short-term rental owners to let their next-door neighbors know that their property is a short-term rental. We cannot demand it. We can't fine you for it, but we strongly suggest that they do that. And so, to me, the ordinance strikes a delicate balance between the interests of property owners and the concerns of our community. Responsible hosts will continue to have the opportunity to generate additional income, while visitors to our city will have access to a diverse range of accommodations. By fostering a responsible short-term rental market, we can stimulate economic growth, attract tourists, and enhance the overall appeal of Wilmington. The financial implications of this ordinance are significant. In 2024 alone, the city of Wilmington could have generated an estimate of $345,000 in revenue from short-term rental taxes. These funds can be allocated to critical initiatives such as, like I named earlier, home repair lottery, addressing delinquent water and tax bills, and funding enforcement efforts. Moreover, by regulating short-term rentals, we can curtail illegal and unregulated units. These operations can pose safety risks and can negatively impact our community. And I would also like to say another reason for the regulation is that the police officers will know what properties are short-term rentals, and so that will be a trigger for them. They can look at it and see because it's already registered. A lot of people in here had an issue, said, well, who's going to regulate it? Who's going to regulate the deceased and desist? The same people that's supposed to regulate this deceased and desist will be the same people that are going to regulate this. So, it's one half dozen or the other. So I'm just looking, again, this is 1/8 of the city community that is being represented. And we've had people from several different districts. And I implore you all, if it doesn't get passed, which many of you may feel is beneficial, please know that we have no control. So just like they said, 2 people just got a rental property next door to them, they can get 3 more or 4 more because it's not regulated. So now you're complaining about, no, you don't want any regulation, but then you're opening up to a bunch of other people to come in and purchase short-term rentals. So my thing is just, I was hoping that I got the support that I needed for this. However, I do want all the community to understand that if this doesn't go out, or if it dies here in community, I want those to know that I have supported everyone in each community, not just one district, the overall city of Wilmington, and the individuals that I heard from the 1st to the 8th district. I need that to be clear. Oh, and I want to address, respect is due when respect is given. So when we are spoken to in a manner that is disrespectful, we choose not to be argumentative and we choose not to argue. However, when we are spoken to rudely, unfortunately, respect is given as respect is due. And I just have to say that. And again, this is my last committee meeting. I did not win my re-election, but please understand, you will see me again in 4 years. So we can smile now, we can enjoy, but understand, I am a community leader. I fight for my community, white, black, or indifferent. And just because I'm not on council, you still have to address me as Council Member Fields or Honorable Brigida Fields. It's your choice. But other than that, I'm going to give it to the committee chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 34 of the City Code to establish short-term residential rental regulations. Do I have a motion to move this ordinance out?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to add this. So before we even go there for the vote, what I've decided is, because there is a large fiscal positive impact that will help the city, but it hasn't been listed on the this ordinance. So what we're going to do, and the committee chair, she promised me that she will work on this, is that we're going to talk to the finance department and make sure that we can show what the 2% look like and what the permit fees look like in order for everyone to see exactly the positive impact that this ordinance will have. So at this moment, I will be holding it, but please understand, it is coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields. With that said, this legislation is being held. It will not be voted out of committee. It will not be voted before council. It will be removed. So I want to thank everyone that came to speak so passionately about what you believe. And we certainly encourage more dialogue around this, that we can come together and have those meetings and everyone have their input.
We're still in a meeting. Excuse me, we're still in a meeting. We still have other legislation that needs to be read, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we're going to move on to ordinance 24-054, an ordinance to amend Chapter 5 of the City Code to require funeral service providers to provide a probate information sheet to personal representatives of a descendant. Councilmember White, you can speak on your legislation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This ordinance on background deals or attempts to deal with a couple of issues. One, in terms of generating and building generational wealth. Let me just read the whereas that's most applicable. An individual capacity to retain in their lifetime and the following their deceased after affects the transfer of wealth to their descendants. The prevalence of a lack of estate planning, countless properties at risk have tangled titles. In tangled titles, that definition is basically that there's property in the house, but the ownership tree is not engaged. And it disrupts families' abilities to take full possession of their inheritance. A national survey by Consumer Reports found that 67% of Americans do not have a will. However, among minorities, 67% of English-speaking Asians do not have a will. 77% of African Americans and 82% of Hispanics lack this key element of the estate planning process. Madam Chair, the synopsis is this, that this ordinance adds a new article under Chapter 5 of the City Code requiring funeral service providers to provide an informational sheet and packet regarding how probate estates to descendant families or their representative with whom funeral services are arranged. Many city residents are unaware of the need to probate an estate or the benefits associated therewith, which contributes to title disputes for properties within the city. This ordinance, by providing city residents through funeral services providers to probate information, would facilitate a smoother transfer of real estate assets and reduce potential disputes. Again, Madam Chair, this is an educational piece. I've spoken with representatives of the state Association of Funeral Directors and one of our past colleagues, Councilman Wright.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm glad that you have looked into this because it is truly an issue when you think about how many families are unprepared. I work in home care, and when I have deceased patients, this comes up a lot with what to do. And yeah, it is a mess because you're dealing with something that's very emotional. And then when we have issues here with housing in the city of Wilmington, there's a lot of properties here with tangled titles that you're not able to sell, you're not able to repurpose. We have put provisions in the law that we would not fine people on vacant property fines that are in the situation and that they're currently working on getting ownership so that they can sell it, fix it, live in it, whatever they need to do with it. But it's not a huge percentage, but it is a percentage of what does happen in our city when you see a property sit empty for multiple years. And with this in place, Councilman White, I firmly believe that that would expedite the process for the families involved, as well as with accountability and keeping our cities with homes that are repurposed, as we keep hearing about the housing shortage. So I think that this is a really, really good, and I'm planning to support this. Councilmember Field?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a good piece of legislation. I will be asking to be a co-sponsor. This is an area where we have individuals that get houses, or that houses are transferred over to them, but they're not on the deed, or their names haven't been submitted. So in order for them to get any type of financial assistance from any agency, their name actually has to be on the deed. So with this being in place, I think this helps them helps them down the road. So I really appreciate this because a lot of our community, they don't know, they don't have an understanding, and we haven't prepared our community. So this is one way of educating our community and getting everybody ready for circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other council members? Anyone online that would like to make a comment? I see a hand raised.
Yes, Councilwoman Oliver.
Thank you. Acknowledging that Councilmember Oliver has joined us. Will you be making a comment on this legislation?
No, I'd like to be a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. I too would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Anita, anyone else?
Yes, we have someone online.
Anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? We have someone online that's a Zoom user. Do we know who that is?
Hold on.
Okay. If anyone wants
Hello,
to
Councilmember White. This is Susana Casado, and I really appreciate you putting this part of legislation in because I know it does impact a lot of our marginalized communities that do not have the affordability to be able to put these things in place. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can come up, please. Thank you.
It's a complicated issue. I know people that have passed away without wills, and it's an absolute mess trying to figure things out, going through probate when you don't know anything. So the city providing the service is a great idea. It's fully supported.
Thank you for speaking on that.
David Storm. David Storm. Sorry.
David, thank you, David. David Storm. Do we have anyone else? Okay, let's call for the vote. At this time, we are
Madam
going-
Chair,
Yes.
I have a last comment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Madam Chair. Full disclosure, I'm a commercial real estate broker. I've been in the business for over 30-plus years. I've personally known families who've left legacy properties on the table. In other words, where the house was owned by the mother or the father or the parents. With no probate, there was no way to transfer that property. And people lost a significant amount of wealth in that process. So I appreciate the comments and the support thereof, and I appreciate the support of the funeral directors of the state of Delaware to further this educational piece. So thank you, Madam Chair. No other comments?
Thank you. I will take a motion to substitute to an ordinance to amend Chapter 5 of the City Code to require. Thank you. Can we get a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion has been carried, and this will go to one of our council meetings in December, either this Thursday or the following Thursday. The next item is ordinance 24-055, an ordinance to amend Chapter 3 of the City Code to increase the fine for dog owners whose dog bites somewhat while off leash. This is sponsored by Councilmember Oliver. You may proceed to speak on this legislation, Councilwoman.
Yes, can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Loud and clear.
Okay, this ordinance to amend 310 of the city code regarding the dogs that's off the leash. I experienced a family who was going to be here tonight, but they had some other tragedy, and they do plan on being at the city council. She was, Miss Church was brought by a dog, a pit bull on 10th Street, and two other women came out the house. They were also bit up, went to the hospital, were able to get technical shots, and they survived, but Miss Church, she didn't survive. And it's, so they kept calling me. It was, it was a tragedy, but we have to enforce individuals that have these dogs. They have to have a leash. They can't just be running around like that. People say, "Oh, he won't do nothing to you. He's okay." No, he's an animal, and he may know your scent and your family's scent, but he's a dog. He's an animal, and he mauled her to death, and she died a couple of days later in a hospital, and it was unfortunate, and it shouldn't have happened. So this is where this legislation is coming from. If you have an animal, and you should have him on the leash. That's the bottom line, and I totally agree. So this is what it is. If anybody has any questions, feel free. So it's a minimum fine, I think of $1,000, and a maximum up to $3,000.
Thank you, Councilwoman Oliver. I know that having gotten complaints from constituents, neighborhoods like Cool Spring Park, Tilton Park, where dogs have been loose, there have been attacks on smaller dogs. I've heard of them very tragically. A very good friend, her dog was also attacked, and just the pictures of the blood and her trying to take the dog to the hospital, didn't make it, were just traumatic. And as some may know, I was attacked by a dog June 26, a year and a half ago, and I'm still going to therapy for it. The dog had gotten out, but we really, as animal owners, have to be responsible, especially with dangerous breeds or with animals that are not trained, and that's why we have these leash laws. And it's just tragic that this had to happen and somebody lost their life. I'm thankful every day that I still have my hand, but it was very traumatic, and it is something hard to come back from. So my sympathy to that family that happened. Thank you for this legislation. I will be supporting it. And as we move forward, it's about accountability and holding people responsible.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Yes, actually, I would like to be added as co-sponsor as well. And is there anyone online, any other council members that have comments? Anyone here from the public that would like to speak? Yes, please.
Bridget Storm. I just want to say that, like, I've seen people with dogs off leashes in Brandywine Park all the time, and it always unsettles me. So I think this is a great legislation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember
Motion.
Fields?
Hold on. Madam Chair, I would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Okay, Councilman White, at this time, we.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I just want.
Councilmember, I'm sorry,
I guess-
Councilmember Oliver.
No, I just would like to thank everybody who was added as a co-sponsor, and you will see the family members on whatever day that you say it's going to be on the agenda.
Great, thank you. All right, at this time, I will take
Motion, Madam Chair.
motion.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second. All in favor, respond with an aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Nay? Okay, the ayes have it. This will be heard in the, either this Thursday or the following Thursday's council meeting, which will be the last meeting of the year. At this.
Madam Chair, can you give me the exact date, please, so I can let the family know? I'm sorry.
December 12th, next Thursday.
December 12th, it is scheduled to be on the agenda. Thank you. At this time, I will take
Motion, Madam Chair, to adjourn.
Well, first, let's thank everyone who came out this evening. Thank you for everyone giving us your opinions, pro or con, very passionate issues, something that we definitely will move forward to discuss and get more input from the community. Thankful that we did have participation and to see the community coming forth and speaking. Your voices were heard, and we truly appreciate that. Don't ever want anyone to think that your voices can't be heard. Yes?
Madam Chair, may I ask you a question before we move on?
Yes, we're getting ready to adjourn, but go ahead.
No, what is, and only reason why I'm asking is because, what is the last date of council meeting?
December 12th is our final.
That's the last date?
That's our last council
Okay.
meeting, the second Thursday, and after that we break and we go
Thank
into a
you
new
so
year.
much.
And
Okay,
January
that's all I'm
7th will be the inauguration. Go ahead, Councilmember Fields.
Yes, thank you, Committee Chair. I just want to say to all my colleagues who I serve with on this committee, I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate everything that we've worked together, whether we passed or did not pass. But I want everyone to know who's watching this, I'm not going anywhere. I will be around. I am a community leader by heart. So I just want everybody to know. And also, when it comes to the ordinance that I tabled, I want to make it very clear. It was held because I want to make sure that the fiscal impact is noted at the bottom of the legislation. No other reason other than that. So thank you. And one more thing, and anybody on here, on City Council, they have an opportunity to write legislation just like I did. So they have that opportunity. They don't have to jump on mines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Madam, my hand is up.
Yes, Councilmember Oliver.
Yeah, I don't mean, I'm sorry.
I know,
don't
I'm
mean-
sorry, I can't see your hand and no one told me your hand was up. I thought we were done.
No, I too would like to, since this is Councilman Fields and White's last committee meeting, I just would like to give them kudos to being good legislators and working in our community. And it's been a pleasure working with them on City Council. I know we have a council meeting, but that's not where you say everything. But I wanted to say it in the committee meeting, and I may repeat myself. I really appreciated working with both of you. Thank you so much for serving the city of Wilmington. God bless.
Thank
It's not
you.
an easy job. Sure.
Thank you, and I do echo those sentiments, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with both of you and have you be part of this committee. At this time, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, respond with aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed and would like to stay here right till 8 o'clock? No one? Okay, it's adjourned.